Hi all my ICSE students, how are you all? And I hope you all are doing well. So let's begin with the next story that we have for our portion, and that is The Last Lesson by Alphonse Daudet. Please open your textbooks. We shall read about the author first. He is a French novelist. Alphonse Daudet, 1847 to 1897, was a French novelist. The Last Lesson was a short story set against the backdrop of the Franco-Prussian War, which deals with the occupation of Alsace-Lorraine in the year 1870. The story tells us what happens when there's an attempt to slowly sever the ties between a people and its language by a powerful enemy. The last lesson is a great reminder of how we cannot take our language for granted and how important it is to love and to learn one's language in order to protect one's individual collective identity. The story is also a sharp and poignant reminder on how important it is not to put off learning. Its beauty lies in its patriotic appeal. The author takes a humane look at a teacher's self appraisal and his grief at the impending separation. So we have got a gist of the story over here by Alphonse Daudet. Like I told you, he's like it's given to us. He's a French novelist. So most of the words I'll be trying to pronounce with a in the French manner. And so we pronounce it as Alphonse Daudet. The E is normally silent in French, so we don't pronounce the E, so we say it as Alphonse Daudet. Okay, and it was the Franco-Prussian War. Do you know what was Prussia? You can write that down. Prussia was a former major power in Central Europe. Prussia was a former major power in Central Europe, comprising of Germany, Poland, and some parts of Austria. So it comprised of Germany, Poland, and some parts of Austria. That is Prussia. So he's talking about the Franco-Prussian War in this lesson, and the teacher who is the narrator is the teacher, and the teacher is stressing on the point that how important it is not to put off your learning for a later stage. We normally do that. Okay, I'll do it tomorrow, and then that tomorrow never seems to come. So so that is one thing that the message of the story is, and also that you do not take your language for granted. We do not take our language as you have to, so that you can protect your collective identity. So we do not take our language for granted. So let's start with the lesson. I'll read the story first. I started for school very late that morning and was in great dread of a scolding, especially because M. Amel had said that he would first question us on participles, and I didn't know the first word about them. For a moment, I thought of running away and spending the day out of doors. It was so warm, so bright. The birds were chirping at the edge of the woods, and in the open field back of the sawmill, the Prussian soldiers were drilling. It was all much more tempting than the rule of participles, but I had the strength to resist and hurried off to school. When I passed the town hall, there was a crowd in front of the bulletin board. For the last 2 years, all our bad news had come from there. The lost battles, the draft, the orders of the commanding officer, and I thought to myself without stopping, what can be the matter now? Then, as I hurried by as fast as I could go, the blacksmith watcher, who was there with his apprentice reading the bulletin, called after me, "Don't go so fast, bub. You'll get to your school in plenty of time." I thought he was making fun of me and reached M. Amel's little garden all out of breath. Usually, when school began, there was a great bustle, which could be heard out in the street. The opening and closing of the desks, the lessons repeated in unison, very loud, with our hands over our ears to understand better, the teacher's great ruler rapping on the table. But now, it was all so still. I had counted on the commotion to get to my desk without being seen. But of course, that day, everything had to be as quiet as a Sunday morning. Through the window, I saw my classmates already in their places. Amel walking up and down with his terrible iron ruler under his arm. I had to open the door and go in before everybody. You can imagine how I blushed and how frightened I was, but nothing happened. Amel saw me and said very kindly, "Go to your place quickly, little Franz. We were beginning without you." I jumped over the bench and sat down at my desk. Not till then, when I had got a little over my fright, did I see that our teacher had on his beautiful green coat, his frilled shirt, and the little black silk cap all embroidered that he never wore except on inspection and on prize days. Besides, the whole school seemed so strange and solemn. But the thing that surprised me the most was to see on the back benches there that were always empty the village people sitting quietly like ourselves. Old Hauser with his three-cornered hat, the former mayor, the former postmaster, and several others besides. Everybody looked sad, and Hauser had brought an old primer thumbed at the edges, and he held it open on his knees with his great spectacles lying across the pages. While I was wondering about it all, M. Hamel mounted his chair and in the same grave and gentle tone which he had used for me said, "My children, this is the last lesson that I shall give you. The order has come from Berlin to teach only German in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine. The new master comes tomorrow. This is your last French lesson. I want you to be very attentive." What a thunderclap these words were to me. Oh, the wretches, that was what they had put. Oh, the wretches, that was what they had put on the town hall. My last French lesson. Why, I hardly knew how to write. I should never learn any more. I must stop there then. Oh, how sorry I was for not learning my lessons, for seeking birds' eggs, or for going sliding on the Saar. My books that had seemed such a nuisance a while ago, so heavy to carry. My grammar and my history of the saints were old friends now that I couldn't give up. And M. Amel too. The idea that he was going away, that I should never see him again, made me forget all about his ruler and how cranky he was. Poor man, it was in honor of this last lesson that he had put up his fine Sunday clothes. And now I understood why the old man of the village was sitting there in the back of the room. It was because they were sorry too that they had not gone to school anymore. It was their way of thanking our master for his 40 years of faithful service and of showing the respect for the country that was theirs no more. While I was thinking of all this, I heard my name called. It was my turn to recite. What would I not have given to be able to say that dreadful rule of the participle all through, very loud and clear and without one mistake? But I got mixed up on the first words and stood there holding on to my desk, my heart beating and not daring to look up. I heard M. Amel say to me, "I won't scold you, little Franz. You must feel bad enough. See how it is? Every day we have said to ourselves, 'Bah, I have plenty of time. I'll learn it tomorrow.' And now you see where we've come out." Ah, that's the great trouble with Alsace. She puts off learning till tomorrow. Now those fellows out there will have the right to say to you, "How is it you pretend to be Frenchmen and yet you can neither speak nor write your own language?" But you are not the worst, poor little Franz. We all have a great deal to reproach ourselves with. Your parents were not anxious enough to have you learn. They preferred to put you to work on a farm or at the mills so as to have a little more money. And I've been to blame also. Have I not often sent you to water my flowers instead of learning? And then I wanted to go fishing. Did I not just give you a holiday? Then, from one thing to another, M. Amel went on to talk of the French language, saying that it was the most beautiful language in the world, the clearest, the most logical, that we must guard it among us and never forget it, because when a people are enslaved, as long as they hold fast to their language, it is as if they had the key to their prison. Then he opened a grammar and read us a lesson. I was amazed to see how well I understood it. All he said seemed so easy, so easy. I think too that I had never listened carefully and that he had never explained everything with so much patience. It seemed almost as if the poor man wanted to give us all he knew before he was going away and to put it in our heads at one stroke. After the grammar, we had a lesson in writing. That day, M. Amel had new copies for us, written in a beautiful round hand. France, Alsace, France, Alsace. They looked like little flags floating everywhere in the schoolroom, hung from the rod at the top of our desks. You ought to have seen how everyone set to work and how quiet it was. The only sound was the scratching of the pens over the paper. Once some beetles flew in, but nobody paid any attention to them, not even the littlest ones, who worked right on tracing their fish hooks as if this was French too. On the roof, the pigeons cooed very low, and I thought to myself, will they make them sing in Germans, even the pigeons? Whenever I looked up from my writing, I saw M. Amel sitting motionless in his chair and gazing first at one thing, then at another, as if he wanted to fix in his mind just how everything looked in that little schoolroom. Fancy! For 40 years he had been there in the same place with his garden outside the window and his class in front of him, just like that. Only the desks and the benches had been worn smooth. The walnut trees in the garden were taller, and the hop vine that he had planted himself twined about the windows to the roof. How it must have broken his heart to leave it all, poor man, to hear his sister moving about in the room above, packing their trunks, for they must leave the country the next day. But he had the courage to hear every lesson to the very last. After the writing, we had a lesson in history, and then the babies chanted their ba, be, bi, bo, boo down there at the back of their room. Old Hauser had put on his spectacles and, holding his primer in both hands, spelt the letters with them. You could see that he too was crying. His voice trembled with emotion, and it was so funny to hear him that we all wanted to laugh and cry. And how well I remember it was that last lesson. All at once, the church clock struck 12, then the Angelus. At the same time, the trumpets of the Prussians, returning from drill, sounded under our windows. M. Amel stood up, very pale, in his chair. I never saw him look so tall. My friends, said he, I. But something choked him. He could not go on. Then he turned to the blackboard, took a piece of chalk, and bearing on with all his might, he wrote as large as he could, Vive la France! Long live France! Then he stopped and leaned his head against the wall, and without a word, he made a gesture to us with his hand. School is dismissed. You may go. It's a very touching lesson, isn't it? A very touching story. Okay, by the way, this spelling of what is written, of course, it's given, the English spelling is given to you all, but it's pronounced as, in French, it's pronounced as Vive la France. And if you're pronouncing it in English, it is pronounced as Vive la France. We pronounce the R if we say France, but in French, you say it as France. So it's Vive la France. So with that, I finished the reading of the story, and I'll begin by giving you the setting. We'll first do the setting of the story. Okay? Take a copy as usual of the setting. Let's read it. Alphonse Daudet from 1840 to 1897. Setting. The story is set during the days of the Franco-Prussian War. That time, Prussia consisted of Germany, Poland, and parts of Austria. Prussia, led by Bismarck, had defeated France. Alsace and Lorraine had been a source of conflict between France and Prussia because it is an industrial area with valuable iron ore deposits. The story follows the three unities of time, place, and action. So, all the three unities are followed over here. The action is no more than 24 hours, a single physical location, which is in and around a school in Alsace, France. The teacher, M. Amel, takes a last class to drive home the importance of the native language, French. Thus, the setting of the story is consistent with the events and the situation that has been described in the story. So, that much for the setting. And of course, the title is very important. We'll do the title also. I'll give you a note on the title. Please take it down. Okay, so let's read the title. Why is it important and why is the last lesson so important? The last lesson is the most appropriate title for the story by Alphonse Daudet, as the entire story revolves around the teacher, Monsieur Amel. Now, like I told you, the pronunciation of Monsieur, in English we call it as Monsieur, but otherwise in French it's pronounced as Monsieur. So, Monsieur Amel, who teaches French in Alsace, France. The narrator of the story is a young boy named Franz. He passes the bulletin board at the center of the town and sees a crowd gathered over there, reading something written on it. He remarks that for the last 2 years, all the bad news had come from there. He does not care to stop and continues to school. Reaching school, he notices that the important people of his village are all occupying the back benches. His teacher announces that he will be leaving the country, and this was his last lesson since the Prussians had annexed their homeland and they would be taught German instead of French. Therefore, this title is very appropriate. M. Amel gives all present in the classroom a lesson for their life. He advises them to preserve their French language, which is like a key that leads the enslaved to freedom. Before ending his last lesson, he writes Vive la France on the blackboard. This served as his last teaching to all those present in the classroom that day, and thus the title is justified. So, therefore, the last lesson is a justified title because that is the last lesson that the French teacher has taught them. He has taught them Vive la France. So, that is what he has taught because France has been captured. The author has maintained all the three unities of time and place, and everything takes place in one day. Means in 24 hours the whole story takes place. Okay, we'll continue with the style, etc., in my next module. So see you all again then at my next module, and wishing you all a goodbye.